Speeches will apply. Mr. Philip Davies.
Mr. Speaker, can I first of all say that I very much agree with my right honourable and learned friend from Beaconsfield about the nature of political debate in this country. He's absolutely right to point that out, and I agree with him wholeheartedly. The second point I want to make, Mr. Speaker, is that many people in this House seem to forget that there's been two meaningful votes. The first meaningful vote was this House deciding to give a referendum to the British people. And the second meaningful vote was the referendum result itself, in which the people voted to leave the European Union. They were meaningful votes. Now, the point, I'm not giving away because time's limited. The point is, Mr. Speaker, is that what's happened since then is that some people who didn't like the result of that referendum, and perhaps didn't even expect the result of that referendum, have now found a newfound enthusiasm for the rights of this Parliament to decide all sorts of things, because they were quite happy for all of these powers to be given over to the European Union willy-nilly. Now they've got this newfound enthusiasm that this House should decide everything. That if only, I'm not going to give way, if that only were the case before. Now, I do excuse from this, Mr. Speaker, my right honourable and learned friend, the member for Rushcliffe. He didn't vote to have a referendum, and therefore there is absolutely no reason why he should feel in any way bound by the result of that referendum. And I perfectly respect that. His position has been entirely consistent. What I have no time for, Mr. Speaker, are people... I'm not going to give way, even though he is the father of the House. Even though I'll give way to the father.
Just briefly, to make it clear that this totally irrelevant argument that we're trying to reverse the referendum is as irrelevant to me as it is to any other of my honourable and right honourable friends. This House voted for an enormous majority to invoke Article 50. We're now trying to debate and have parliamentary influence over what we're going to do when we've left, and what the form of our new arrangements with Europe and the rest of the world will be. So could he please stop yet again arguing, not just him, I mean, he's the ultimate member to do it, introducing this totally irrelevant argument and trying to say what is wrong with the process actually set out in the Lord's Amendment. What is the excessive power that it apparently gives to this House to have a say when the negotiations are finished?
Well, I'm afraid, Mr. Speaker, that the public are not fooled by the motives of people who are clearly wanting to delay, frustrate or overturn the result of the referendum. It's a shame some of them can't admit it. The right honourable member, the Shadow Secretary of State, said that people had said over a long period of time that if we did this, Brexit would be frustrated. If we did that, Brexit would be frustrated. Can I suggest to the Shadow Secretary of State, he gets out of London, he gets out a bit, because what people around the country feel is that Brexit is being frustrated. It's already been frustrated by a great deal by this House. And so the idea that he thinks Brexit hasn't been frustrated, he needs to get... Well, my right honourable friend who has taken a vow of independence since he lost his job as a government minister that was never shown before, asked how. I would invite him to get out. He's very welcome up to Yorkshire to actually see what... well, he speak to people, Mr. Speaker. He should speak to people. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, is that I'm perfectly content for this House to have a vote. Absolutely, it should have a vote on whether it wants to accept the deal negotiated by the government that it comes back with. Absolutely right that this House votes on whether or not to accept that deal. And the government should accept the vote of this House. What it cannot do, having decided to give the people a vote in a referendum, it cannot find some strange parliamentary mechanism in order to frustrate and overturn the result. He didn't give way, and I'm not going to give way either because time is limited. We cannot vote to reverse the decision of the referendum. And people outside this House, Mr. Speaker, need to know this very clearly today, that those people... I'm not going to give way, there isn't time. I want people to know outside of this House that those people today who are voting for this meaningful vote, what they mean is that if the government decides that no deal is better than a bad deal. And doesn't it go to show how out of touch this place is that it's even a contentious statement that no deal is better than a bad deal? I mean, it's a statement of the blindingly obvious, but it's amazing that some people find that a contentious statement. Mr. Speaker, I am not giving way to let other people have time. People should bear that. I'm giving way to the Father of the House. Mr. Speaker, I appreciate that the Honourable Ava Broxo doesn't like hearing arguments with which she disagrees, but I'm going to plough on regardless, despite her chuntering from a sedentary position. The point is, Mr. Speaker, that the fact is that no deal is better than a bad deal is blindingly obvious to anybody with even a modicum of common sense. What people in this House are being invited to do is that if the government decide that no deal is better than a bad deal, that this House should somehow be able to say to the government, you've got to continue being a member of the European Union while you go back and renegotiate this and renegotiate that. I cannot stand aside and allow that to happen, Mr. Speaker, and I don't think the British people will thank anybody in this House who votes that way. And let nobody be in any doubt, anybody who votes for this meaningful vote today, their constituents should know they are voting to try and keep us in the European Union against their will.